Did you know that humans are getting shorter? What does bacon and eggs have to do with the CIA successfully overthrowing the government of Guatemala? Which country has a life expectancy of only 14 years old? Learn the stories behind these and so much more in my new book, Facts That Aren't True. Link in the description.
What's your stance towards the existence of God?
God might exist, but I don't see any evidence that God does exist. And
Yes.
I don't think that we could actually have evidence that God exists because we don't know how magic works.
Okay. Um, do you believe that God exists or doesn't exist? Or are you like totally on the
That there's a
fence?
dichotomy that either God must exist or doesn't exist.
Well, I think that it obviously is a dichotomy, right? Either God exists or God doesn't exist. And I'm just wondering, are you like right on the fence, 50-50 as far as belief goes? Not knowledge, but belief.
I think
Or,
I think a God could exist. Now, I think that there are logical problems with like the personal theistic God with the omni properties that I don't think you can really get away from. But that doesn't make me think that some sort of God is impossible to exist, even if it's not the Christian God or whatever.
yeah, so if you don't mind, I'd like to just be a little bit more specific about what I'm asking. So if you asked me if I'm about to go to the casino, you say, "Hey, do you think that you're going to win if you go to the casino? Like, do you believe you're going to win?" I'd say no. And the reason why I would say no is because I know that the odds are slightly not in my favor. They're in the favor of the house, right? So even when the odds are slightly in my favor, I still have a belief, right? I don't say I know that I will lose, but I do believe that I will lose.
Yeah, I
And
think
I'm
it's
wondering
more likely that you will lose than not. So
exactly.
we
So
have
I would say I
we
believe
lazily
that.
just say no.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm wondering when it comes to God, would you say you're like right on the fence, like 50-50, or do you believe that God doesn't exist? Or obviously you don't believe that he does, right?
I mean, I don't know how to assign it a probability. Obviously, saying, well, either does exist or doesn't exist, so it's 50-50. That's obviously stupid. So, what kind of
Well,
calculus
that
can
wasn't
be
what I was
done?
saying.
No, I know it's
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
So, what kind of calculus can be done? I have absolutely no idea how to put any kind of number to it.
So I mean, it sounds like it's pretty fair to say you're like right on the fence then. I
Uh,
mean, because
to
if
me,
you
that
if
to me that implies that I'm almost reluctant to be a disbeliever. I don't feel that way,
hmm.
but I mean, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like if somebody asked me about a proposition that I had some feelings towards, I would be like, yeah, I lean towards this being the case, but you're not even saying that. So it sounds like you're right on the fence, just based on what you're saying. But if I've got you wrong, I apologize. I'm just saying normally in a conversation, if you ask somebody about a proposition and they're not like, yeah, I lean this way or lean that way, I mean, the most of the time that would mean that they don't lean either way and they're just right on the fence, which is okay. I'm just curious.
I wouldn't say I'm really right on the fence because I mean the biggest reason would be I have no clue what evidence of a god would even look like because I don't know what the characteristics of or properties of a supernatural entity are, and I find all the arguments to be a force fitting of things we
Yeah.
know into a conclusion. There is no working model
You know
behind
what?
behind it.
We should actually definitely talk about that right now because I think that that's a very important thing for us to hopefully get on the same page about right now. What is God? And let me tell you what I think God is in the most simplistic form. And then you can tell me what you think. But in my mind, everything either comes from a mind or it comes from something without a mind. And I think, obviously, that if everything comes from something with a mind, then that mind would be God. So if all of reality is grounded in a mind, then that would mean that God exists. And if reality is grounded in something without a mind, then that would mean that atheism is true, meaning like big dog atheism, where they're like, no God exists.
Yeah, so
So that's
I
what
have
I
a
think. What do
huge
you think?
yeah, I have a huge problem with this.
Okay.
When you say everything comes from a mind, you know, um,
Hmm.
well, we know that minds exist, or at least, I mean, the only thing I am certain of is that I have one. If you have one, I can't really prove that, but I believe it because I think I have extremely good reasons to.
Well, thanks, man. I
So,
appreciate that.
so everything we know about minds is that they are something that living organisms have. Now, this clearly isn't what God is. So the idea that, oh, therefore there's an eternal mind, no, that doesn't. The fact that we know minds exist doesn't give us evidence in favor of God's magical outside this universe mind exists, because that's incoherent with respect to what we know about minds.
Okay, well, if everything does in fact come from a mind, wouldn't you agree with me that God exists? I mean, if we were to
No,
establish that as a fact, you wouldn't say that that was God?
that what's God?
The mind that if all of reality is grounded in a mind, like there's a mind that is responsible for everything else that exists besides itself, you would say that that mind is not God?
No.
You wouldn't, or you would?
What the the problem with this is, for you to say that God has a mind is a claim that has a enormous burden, because the only minds we know of that exist in living organisms. So you need to explain to me, how is it that God has a mind?
Well, I don't think that saying or answering how God has a mind is really that relevant, because a how question isn't really
Then
paramount to
then I can
forming
just,
a belief.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, let
Say
me
the whole thing
explain.
over again.
Yeah, sorry. So what I was saying is, I don't think that these sort of how questions are really that relevant, um, because there are all kinds of things that we believe, even though we don't know exactly how they work. So, I mean, could I speculate about how God has a mind? Sure, and I could give you reasons why I think God has a mind. But what I think is obvious to me anyway is that if reality comes from something without a mind, then God doesn't exist. And if reality comes from something with a mind, even if you can't conceive of it because you're thinking about living organisms, but you do know like how minds operate and how they work because you have one. So if reality
Yeah, but
does
that's
come from a mind,
predicated entirely on brains. So I think the relevant question, which should be like our starting point here, is, do disembodied minds exist?
yeah, see, we can talk about that, but I'm just trying
Yeah, that's what
to.
I want. That's what I need to know in order to even begin to accept this claim about God having a mind.
Yeah, I mean, so you're telling me that if all of reality was grounded in a mind, that wouldn't be God in your view?
If all of reality was grounded in a mind, it wouldn't be God?
Yeah, if it turned out that all of reality was caused to exist by a mind, you would say, okay, this mind,
Yeah,
that's still not
it
God.
could
Is that
just
what you would
be
say?
aliens simulating the matrix. Yeah, which wouldn't be God.
Well, aliens, would aliens simulating the matrix literally be responsible for all of reality or just our reality? I'm talking about all of reality is grounded, including the aliens, because normally aliens are contingent beings. I'm talking about a
All they would
necessary.
have to do is be able to simulate your mind, and then for all you can tell, that would be the same thing as existence itself. But
Yeah, but I'm saying
I have to go
actually,
back
not
to the
like
question
our.
of, do
Yeah.
disembodied minds exist?
Well, obviously, I believe that they do.
Yeah, but I don't. So
Yeah.
can you give me any reason to think disembodied minds exist? Because
Well,
God
yeah.
is a disembodied mind is just a claim. So
Right. And I'm saying that either God exists and God obviously would at the core be a mind, or he wouldn't. I mean, I think pretty much everybody that talks about God, if there's one thing that they all agree on, it would be that God has a mind. You don't think that? Like, to me, that's the
they
key. This.
probably do, but I don't think they spend any time thinking about what that means. I mean, maybe I can ask a different question. What is a mind?
A mind is something that has intention. It's able to be rational. It's something that can think and is aware of itself and other things. It has aboutness. Have you read any
Isn't
stuff
a
about like philosophy of mind?
not very much.
You should.
How's that not just a description of a human being?
Well, a human being, for one, they could be like brain dead, right? They could be dead. Um, so a human being doesn't necessarily is not necessarily able to do those things at all times. Whereas a
Yeah, not
mind, by
always, but you just said a mind can do
yeah,
those things. A human can do those things. I mean, maybe a computer could do those things.
well, a human with a mind can do those things. A human without a mind could not do those things. So,
Sure.
I mean, do you think?
So then, what
Yeah,
is a mind? The ability to do those things?
yeah, I would say mind has to do with certain properties and abilities, like the ones I just listed. Yeah,
Okay,
where
so
you're
is
able
mind a
to
noun or
think
is it an
about.
adjective or adverb? The ability
Well,
to do
mindfulness.
things is more like an adjective or an adverb. So, but I think a mind has to be a noun for this to work at all.
Yeah, I think it's something, and now I'm describing like the traits of what it does, and it's an active thing, right? So when you have a mind,
Okay.
you think, right? You do certain things, so it has certain properties, and
Okay.
I
So
mean,
it's not the ability
yeah,
to do those things, but those are properties that it has. Okay.
yeah, like necessary properties.
Okay. So then, um, is God the only disembodied mind that exists?
Well, I don't know for sure. Obviously, as a Christian, I don't believe so, but I mean, like I said, to me, it's very obvious that reality ultimately either comes from a mind or it does not come from a mind.
Why is
So,
that?
well,
Well,
it's
I
just a
mean
straight
that, but
up.
isn't that kind of like saying everything in the universe either is a potato or isn't a potato? It's kind of
Yeah,
like, yeah,
that would be
but
true as well.
okay, like
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So
I mean, that would also
what
be
does a
true. I don't think that
universe?
that's nearly as interesting.
Yeah, I think I know a good question to ask. What does a universe that is not created by a mind look like?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would say we should expect a universe that is not created by a mind to look like absolute chaos. I mean, imagine a cat walking mindlessly on a keyboard. Okay, your cat, and it's programming a video game. What would you expect that game to look like?
Couldn't well, if so, you're just basically describing randomness, and I can understand
Yeah,
that. Uh,
yeah.
uh, why is it that a universe not created by a mind doesn't behave according to the laws of physics?
Well, yeah. I mean, okay. Well, first of all, just to be clear, I don't know that on your view they are laws, right? On my view, I think I can say that they're laws. On your view, they're observed patterns. Okay, like these are patterns that we've observed again and again and again. But we don't know that these are laws, right? Do you agree with that or no?
I don't know what you're trying to say.
Okay. So when you talk about a law, right, you mean like the law of gravity, something like that?
Universal gravitation, Boyle's law, Hooke's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
law, Hubble
Okay, so
nature
right,
law.
yeah,
These are
so
just observations that we make.
exactly, yeah, they're patterns. We see the same thing happening over and over again,
Yep.
right? So if we go to a gumball machine and we don't know the color of the gumballs that are inside, and we get a gumball out and it's blue, and then we get another gumball out and it's blue, and we get like 50 gumballs out and they're all blue. At what point can we say that we know for sure that all the rest of the gumballs are blue?
I mean, I wouldn't call that. I don't know if that's really all that appropriate for any kind of scientific law. I mean, the problem of induction exists for scientific laws as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm
Problem
talking
of
about.
induction works for
Well,
God's creation as well. Or God
yeah,
isn't an escape from the law of induction. But I don't want to get
well, the
sidetracked
problem of
here.
induction.
Why is it
Yeah,
that
that's
a
fine.
universe not created by a mind wouldn't have laws of physics?
Well, it's not necessarily that it wouldn't, it's that we shouldn't expect it to, I think would be the
And
more
and
accurate way of
and
putting it.
and why is that? So first of all, doesn't preclude. I'm just gonna write that down. But why would we not expect it?
Yeah, well, the same reason why, I mean, imagine if I handed you a video game and I said this video game was the product of your cat mindlessly walking around on the keyboard, and that code was put into the game, and your cat walking on the keyboard was the only code that was responsible for this game. And then you went and you opened up the game, and there were like these stable laws, and there were like rules in the game. I think that would be incredibly surprising, rightfully so. So, but on the other hand, if you opened up the game and you found that, and I said, yeah, this was programmed by a guy that really knew what he was doing. He was intelligent, and he's been doing this a long time. And then you found that there were laws and certain things about that game, you'd be like, oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So what I'm saying is it's very surprising if there's no mind responsible.
I mean, that really just kind of sounds like question begging. It would look designed because the way it looks just makes us scream out loud that it must be designed, therefore it is designed.
Well,
So
let's not straw man. Let's not straw man. Come on. Let's
so a
let's
universe that is
let's
not
be
created by a
charitable.
mind is a universe that might have laws of physics. You think it's more likely that it would have no laws of physics? How can a universe exist if there aren't any laws of physics?
Well, I think that there could be a world that exists that's totally random and chaotic. It obviously wouldn't have anything like us in it, right?
Why,
So there could
why,
be
why
like a
is that? Why
chaos
is a
realm.
universe that humans live in more likely than more
No, I'm
likely
not saying
under
more like
theism than atheism?
no. I think you misunderstood me. What I was saying is that there could be a world that is total randomness and chaos, and it wouldn't have beings like us in that world because
Yeah.
to have living organisms, you need stability, you need order.
Yeah, you gave a symmetry breaker. There's a kind of universe that can exist and it would have laws of physics in it as well if there's no mind behind it. There's also a universe that can exist that is created by mind and it also has laws of physics in it. There's no asymmetry between these. But you said the mind created universe has beings like us in it. Why is that more likely to be true?
Well, like I said, because of the video game analogy that I gave. So if you have a video game in front of
But
you with
but you're just saying it
intelligent creatures,
looks designed.
well, yeah, I mean, do you want to know why I think it looks designed? I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so when we observe minds like ours doing certain things, like when we make things like our minds with our minds, we observe certain key distinctions, or maybe you would call them indicators. Okay, and these indicators are things like order, and complexity and specified complexity. And when we see this sort of thing, then we're like, oh, a mind did that. A mind is responsible because we've seen it over and over again.
Okay,
Now, let me give you just a very quick example
sure.
of what I mean, just to flesh this out. So, if you and I are two detectives and we go into a murder scene, or the scene of what could be a crime, we're looking at a dead body. We're going to look for certain indications of a murder, right? So if we see certain things at certain levels, for example, let's say self-defense wounds. If we see one scratch on the arm, then we're like, maybe it's a murder, that might be a self-defense wound. If we see a bunch of really fresh-looking self-defense wounds on the arms and the legs, right, and then we also see that there's furniture turned over at the scene, and we see that there's bloody footprints that are leaving. These are all indicators. Notice that word there, indicators of a murder. So when we see really strong indicators of a murder because we've observed other murders, then we say, okay, because we see all these indicators, the most likely or the best explanation for the evidence is that there's a murder that took place. And in the same way, when we see indications of design, because we observe what minds do and how minds design things, when we find those same indicators in the natural world, I would say that the best explanation for those indicators is a mind.
Okay. So here's why I think this just doesn't really make any sense. So
Okay.
you're making analogies to things that people do. You're using things that are known, uh, like you're taking things that we know are designed, like video games and stuff
Yeah,
like that, and then
yeah,
saying
inductive.
those are the kinds of things that are products of minds, and I think the universe is like that. And it's like, okay, well, let's remove things we know are designed from the universe. If humans didn't exist, then we would still, in your view, live in a world that is created by a mind, and there's supposedly evidence of design in this universe. So what
Yeah.
would you point to in that universe to be, oh, God designed that thing?
I would point to any instances or of indications of design. So just
Such
like if
as?
we're in a room, yeah, such as any complexity, any order that we see, and it depends on the level, right? Because something can be slightly complex or it can be incredibly complex. Something can be slightly ordered, and it can be incredibly ordered, and it can be everything in
Sure.
between,
All
right?
right.
So
I
depending on
get.
if we see
Let
these
me
things,
interrupt
then
here
the
because I'm
strength
not
of them.
hearing
Yeah,
a
go ahead.
specific example, but I think I can help you out.
Yeah, okay, fine
If
tuning.
you mix a bunch
The
of
laws of nature. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. If you mix a bunch of liquids together, they'll separate by density, right?
Yeah, as far as yeah, that's correct. Yes.
Okay, is that creating order?
Yeah, I would say
Okay.
that that is a
Did
form of
God
creating
do
order.
that, or do those things happen because that is just an intrinsic property that they have?
Well,
And
if God designed,
they respond to outside forces.
yeah, if God is responsible for everything, right? And he either is or he isn't, right? Like I said, either mind is responsible for everything or it isn't. And that's the way that things are, then yeah, God is responsible for it being the way that it is. So I would say that God is responsible for that, and that's the best explanation for it. Now, I guess you're
How
going to
is
say
that
that
the
that's kind
is it can you okay, so you just said, well, God does everything. So the
of, yeah, God would either be
the
responsible for
I think
everything.
that that's kind of the weakest position you can take, because if you say God is responsible for everything, then it doesn't matter what kind of hypothetical anybody comes up with. You just say God could have done that. But that's not a workable idea. That's just a claim.
Well, it's just a distinction. I mean, like I said,
Well, how do you
either
tell
everything
if it's
comes
true or
from a mind.
false?
You look around the world and you say, okay, based on what we know about how minds work, is it more plausible that everything comes from a mind or that it comes from not mind?
But you just asserted that God's responsible for everything. So,
Well, I'm saying that if theism is true, because you were asking me, I think from that framework. So if God did design everything, how would you know, or something like that? But if I misunderstood you, then feel free to re-ask the question. But I was trying to say that if theism is true, then that would be evidence of design, right? I
I
mean, I
mean,
think that would be evidence of
this seems
design, or whether or
viciously
not.
circular, because you're just saying, well, because I gave you an example where we can't use things that are known to be designed to be analogous. So instead, we pointed to liquids sorting out by density. Now, that is an example of creating order. But you specifically said that randomness or whatever, like, can't create order. But gravity, the laws of physics,
I
they
didn't say
can,
that.
but they're not God. But then you just
I
retreat
didn't say
to,
that though.
well, God is the reason why all those things even are, like, that even exist. So ultimately, God's responsible. That's why I said this isn't a workable idea at all, because you just are claiming that everything is God. So if it explains everything, then it explains really nothing in particular. It doesn't explain how anything could be different, or how
Okay.
things could have otherwise been different.
Okay, so I didn't say that randomness cannot create order. I just don't think that that's the best explanation, right? So if I'm looking at, like, let's say I go to a national park and I see some rocks stacked one on top of the other, like 10 different rocks, all growing smaller proportionately, and so there's 10 rocks, and there's order. There's really complexity there, but there's definitely order, maybe some symmetry. And I mean, let's say all the rocks are exactly the same color. And when I look around, all the rocks are different colors, right? So it looks like somebody grabbed specific rocks in order to make sure that they were all the same color, that sort of thing. I'm not saying that it's impossible that like a storm did that or something like that, or something without a mind. I just don't think that that's the best explanation. And I don't think you would think that was the best explanation either, right?
In that specific case, no. But I
Right.
wouldn't
Why?
think that. But I wouldn't think that God did it. I could think
Well,
that a human did
mhm.
it, or maybe a bird, or something like that. So,
Yeah,
but you're trying to invoke, well, minds are responsible for that kind of thing. Okay, but what in the universe am I looking at that looks like design? And what would it
yeah,
look like if it wasn't designed? It really just seems like you are saying, well, it would be it
sure.
like I don't think well, you did say randomness, but the universe would look like random. Well, what does a random universe look like?
Well, I think it would be just completely unintelligible, which is why I think that the intelligibility of the
Why
universe
though?
is.
Because if the laws of physics would exist in either universe, then
I don't think
things
they
would
would.
happen. You think that the laws of physics just wouldn't even exist if
Yeah,
a
of course.
no, you didn't say that earlier though. And this is
Well,
why
no,
this
what
is a
I said
huge
was that
problem,
they could.
because
That,
a random
what I said is
the
that they
concept of
could
a random universe makes
yeah.
absolutely no sense. God didn't create the universe. So it exists. It's made of matter and energy. That matter and energy, they're going to have relations between each other, and it's going to be like things are going to move. For example, the laws of gravity randomly fluctuating over time. How like why that would be the case if God doesn't exist makes no sense to me. It actually makes way more sense if that you would expect randomness if God exists, because God has the ability to do that. If the laws of physics can't modify each other, so under an uncreated or a universe not created by a mind or whatever, they'd be fixed and immutable, which is what they look like to me. So I know I said a lot, but what does a why why would a universe not created by God be random, and what does that even mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, I am not saying it necessarily would be. I just think that we should expect it to be. So, just once again, if you told me that your cat designed a game by walking on the keyboard, it might like the game might look like a world like ours. It might even have intelligent beings once I fire it up, right? It might have all kinds of incredible rules and everything. I would just find that incredibly implausible, right? I'd be if I pulled that game up and I saw that there were these rules and there was this stability and I could make sense of the game, I would be like, "Are you sure that this game was produced by your mindless cat walking on the keyboard? Because I really don't think that it was. That seems very implausible to
So
me."
I
I mean, would you agree that that would be implausible?
that my cat could randomly walk on the keyboard and create a code that creates a video game that
Yeah, like
has
Skyrim. Yeah, like Skyrim.
well, I mean that it could potentially create like a flat plane, perhaps, that you can walk across or something like
Yeah.
it, like to invoke. Oh well, it couldn't have created something extraordinarily complex. Well, okay, but could it create something rudimentary? I forgot how to talk.
Yeah.
Complex,
Well,
perhaps, but I don't want like an analogy to a video game, because I've heard that a bunch before. We're talking
you're
about
asking
the
answer.
world that we live in. What would a universe, or what does a random universe look like?
Well, I'm telling you what I think a random universe would look like. I think it would be completely unintelligible. What do you
Okay,
think
but
a game?
why would it be
Well,
unintelligible?
you've asked me a lot of questions. Let me ask you a question real quick. What do you think a game would look like if it came about through a mindless process like your cat walking on the keyboard? What do you think that game would look like?
I have no idea. It wouldn't have features that video games that we play have, but it would have whatever features get input into it. And then
Hmm.
those features would necessarily have some kind of relation to them. So, um, from the sense of intelligibility, maybe it would be borderline impossible to uncode exactly what's going on. But randomness to me, and if we're trying to apply this to the universe, then I would expect to see the laws of nature just fundamentally changing constantly. That's what randomness sounds like to me, at least. So I'm trying to figure
Yeah.
out
Well,
what a random
yeah.
universe looks like, or an unintelligible.
Yeah, I
Well,
think it would.
you would say it looks unintelligible, but I don't understand
Yeah.
why that would be, because again, it would have laws of physics, and so the way things
No, I don't
happen
think
in
so.
that universe would be dictated by that, which means there would be information. If relationships between things exist, then that means that there's a degree of intelligibility.
Yeah, so just to be clear, I think our disconnect is that we're assuming that there would just be these stable laws of a universe in a universe without God, which is the very thing that I think is very implausible. I don't think that there would just be these stable laws that we
But
could rely on. If
why not?
Well, because of the incredible amount of fine tuning that was required for our universe, and because these laws are very orderly, they're stable, and they
Why,
seem to produce very complex things. All of that screams mind to me. So I think that we should
why
expect the
can't
exact opposite.
why can't that happen naturally?
Well, just to be clear, I haven't said it can't. I'm saying that it's implausible. You keep
Okay,
saying
why?
that I'm saying
Yep, yep.
it can't.
Fair enough.
I'm
Why
saying
is it
implausible
unlikely?
because when we see non-minds do things, they don't typically create any kind of order, whereas laws by necessity are orderly, right?
Do you think that the minds or the laws of physics themselves are minds,
No, of course not.
but they create order all the time?
Yeah, I mean, a code is responsible in a way for creating order, but what's
But
responsible for the
but you're
code?
question begging by saying that it is a code.
I'm
So
not saying code. I'm just That's just an example.
the laws of physics, which are not a mind, create order all the time. So a naturalistic framework absent a god is capable of creating order.
Yeah, I'm not saying that randomness can't create order. I'm just saying it's not the best explanation, right? Like, once again, randomness could create that stack of rocks that I see in the park. When I see that stack of rocks, I don't think that that's the best explanation. Like if you said, "Hey, Darwin, I think that this stack of rocks is not the product of a mind. I think that it is the product of a tornado." I
Sure.
kind of am going to want to, laugh a little bit. I think that that's a little bit silly, right? So
True.
when we see incredibly specified complexity and order and these sorts of things, I think that the best explanation, and this is just to be clear, the design argument is an inference to the best explanation. It's not an inductive argument, and it's not an abductive argument. It might be an inductive argument. Sorry, it's not a deductive argument. It is not a deductive argument, meaning that the conclusion does not necessarily follow, right? It's just saying that this is the best explanation.
Yeah. Okay. Wait. The time has been flying by. We've already done about
I
40
know,
minutes,
man.
so I want to get to some of the bullet points or whatever that I had, but I want to address this thing. Just one more thing with respect to this. Um, so God has the power to willy nilly change the laws all the time and create a completely
Mhm.
random universe. So,
Yeah,
but we live in a universe where that doesn't ever happen. So,
yeah.
why would I not be just in saying, "Oh yeah, it must be just purely naturalistic"? Because if it is, then the laws of physics can't be changed; they're immutable. Because if God exists, He could change them, so they would change all the time. But it has literally never happened.
Well, it doesn't follow that if God could, then he would, right? I mean, there are lots of things that you could do that you don't do or that you would not do, right?
Well, I
So
could
just
well
because,
I could say that I would expect it to happen more than zero times
why would you expect that?
because God has the ability to do it.
Yeah, but just once again, just because you have the ability to do it doesn't mean you do something even just one time, right? Like I have the ability to throw my daughter off a bridge. I've never done it, and I don't think I ever will, right?
Okay. So you think it's more likely that God would leave the laws of physics alone than not leave them alone?
Well, yeah, of course, especially if you think that the reason why the laws of physics are stable is for life. And it does seem, based on, I think, the fine tuning argument, that
Well,
there is
there
very
would
good reason.
Look,
I
for
think that
me, the
there's very
problem
good
with
reason.
this is there would be zero naturalistic explanation for the laws of physics randomly fluctuating. It would be extremely good evidence of something fishy going on, like a god, but we don't have that. So, I mean, that's fine. I want to move on from like design stuff if that's fine with you.
Okay. Just to be clear, have I answered all of your questions so far?
I haven't got to any of them because the design thing was like
You have been
your.
asking me questions.
Yeah, I've been asking you questions, but we were on the topic of design, which was the
All
the
right.
topic
Okay.
you wanted to be on.
Well, well, let me say one thing real quick. So, just for your listeners. So, when we talk about God, I do think that the only rational way to have this conversation is to say that God is a mind, and that we should be arguing or talking about whether or not what we see in the world indicates that the world comes from a mind, or whether it indicates that things do not come from a mind. I think that that's the only intelligible way to talk about just general theism. But anyway, you can go ahead.
Okay, sure. So this is going to be all the things I wrote down are based on your two videos, but almost all of them are from the one about why we shouldn't give evidence to atheists. So I actually
Hmm.
asked this question a really long time ago, but um, why are we talking if you don't think that you should ever give evidence to atheists?
Yeah, well, you did watch the video, right?
Yeah?
So you do remember I didn't say that you just absolutely should not give evidence to an atheist. I did say that there are exceptions, right?
No. I don't
Yes, I
remember
did.
I don't remember that part at all.
You said that you watched the video. At the end, I did
Yeah.
say that there are exceptions to the rule. You got to watch the video. Do you want to go and pull that up?
You can tell me what the exceptions are real quick.
Yeah, sure. So if you're talking to somebody that is good faith, right, and that wants to have a meaningful conversation, what I said in the video and what I still stand by is that it's fine to give evidence, but you shouldn't expect that it's going to change that person's mind. The framing of
Okay, fair
let me just
enough.
expand a little bit here. The framing of the video is that many atheists say, "Give us evidence," and they want to just, basically like sit in judgment of your evidence, and it's basically a game. I think that it's very bad faith. And so I'm trying to warn Christians about that sort of thing. But if you're talking to somebody that is an unbeliever and they're good faith, you can have a productive conversation and discuss evidence. I talk about evidence. I give arguments all the time. It's a
Mm-hmm.
hobby. It's a passion. I love doing it.
Sure.
But
Okay.
um,
As
yeah, go ahead.
like um do you think it's possible that God doesn't exist?
At this point, no.
Okay, a quote from that video is the atheist is not open-minded. I think it is possible that God exists. So, who's more
Yeah.
open-minded?
Well, I would say right now you appear more open-minded. But
Okay.
do you think that there's anything in the world that's not possibly untrue? I mean, like,
What?
is there anything that you're absolutely certain of?
That I exist.
Okay. So, I mean, why do you feel like you're absolutely certain of that? Just because of Descartes, like, I think, therefore I am?
I can't see any logical avenue toward doubting that you exist. It makes no sense. Even if I am, because I think people uh try to sound smart when they discuss this kind of thing, but what they end up
Yeah.
doing is confusing proximate versus ultimate causes. So like let's say that I do live in the matrix. Oh, well then everything that you thought about reality is false. No.
Right.
There is still a screwdriver in my hand. It's just that the screwdriver is a hallucination in my mind. The proximate truth of that statement still is maintained, but some ultimate explanation of it changes. So that's not really, I mean, that's neither here, it's not a contention point to have with you or whatever. It's just
Yeah, no,
a
that's
thing.
that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so let me just get back to your question then, so that you can hopefully understand my answer. So the reason why I asked that is because, in my view, sometimes you have a personal experience of something, and in this case, you would say that you personally have experienced that you exist. So if I doubt that you exist, right, but you personally experience that you exist to such a degree that you can't doubt it. Is it really accurate to say that I'm more open-minded because I'm not sure and you are about the proposition planet Peterson exists?
That was really hard to track.
I'm sorry, man. You want me to try that again?
Yeah, I'll try to write it down.
I'm sorry. So there's a proposition, planet Peterson, Eric, right? Eric exists.
Yep.
Okay.
PP
You
exists.
believe that that is absolutely true. You don't doubt it at all. But if I doubt it, right over here, if I doubt it, but you have personal experience and really good reasons for believing that it's true, and you're absolutely sure of it because of all these good reasons, but I doubt it because I'm just skeptical. Is it fair to say that I'm more open minded than you because I doubt the proposition and you're sure of it?
All right. PP believes, or PP exists and believes it absolutely. Darwin to Jesus doesn't believe it, but I have good reasons. But at the same time, he doubts it. So is it fair to say that you are not more open minded than me, or that you are more open minded to me because you're leaving out the
Yeah, because I'm saying,
possibility of something that I claim that I know is true is false. That's interesting. I mean,
yeah,
I don't really have a response to that, I guess. I mean, it seems
yeah.
to track. Um, I mean,
Well,
I
I'm just
wouldn't.
wondering what you think about it, because that's kind of how I feel about it. And when it comes to the existence of God, it's like, are you more open minded? I don't really know, because in the situation or in the scenario that I just gave you, I think it would be strange for you to be like,
There's
yeah, you doubting my existence. That means that you're more open minded. I mean, it just means that you have access to something that I don't. I mean, it
Yeah.
could be that there
So
are cases.
that's what I was going to
Right.
bring up, actually. So
Yeah.
I don't want to dwell on this too long because I have a lot of
Yeah.
stuff I want to go over. But
Cool.
these kinds of personal revelatory truths are relevant, or they can only really be proven to the person experiencing them, and that's it. So
Right.
that's
That's true.
why. So I forgot where I was going with that. I know that's what I wanted to say, but yeah, the claim that I exist and you doubt it is this, like, I can't prove it to you that
Yeah.
I have a subjective experience. I mean, I feel like I could prove to you without a shadow of a doubt that I exist. I could just ask you, "Are you talking to me?" and you would say yes, right?
Yeah. Well, I might
But
solve, right?
different kind of thing. All right, that's interesting. But I
Yeah.
want to. So
Well, my just to be clear, my point there is that when somebody doubts something, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are being more open-minded. It just kind of depends on the situation. Because I think if I were
sure.
to doubt your existence and you're like, no, I'm sure that I exist, you wouldn't be like, yeah, you're the one that's being more open-minded. You'd be like, you're dumb, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, being a global skeptic is not open mindedness. I think that that's thick headedness.
right, yeah.
Okay,
I'm
so
glad. I'm glad you're not a global skeptic. By the way, you're clearly not.
yeah.
Anyway, go.
Another reason in your video that you said that we shouldn't give evidence to atheists, you said it's not biblical. The Bible says that all men know that God exists. So do you think that I
Yes.
am lying when I say I don't believe in God? This is always very
Yeah.
odd to me.
Yes, I think that you are not necessarily lying to me, but I think that we all have this knowledge. So the way that I put it in the video that I still agree with is that it's like a woman who's being cheated on, right? And she doesn't want to admit that truth to herself because it's a painful truth that she doesn't want to believe. But deep down, she knows the indicators. She's noticed things on some conscious level, and so she is aware, but she suppresses it because it's too uncomfortable for her to admit consciously to herself. So I think that
I don't
with
I don't even disagree that subconsciously we know, and this is actually experimentally proven to be true. Split brain patients pretty clearly demonstrate that you can subconsciously know something, but whatever you are can be incapable of knowing that information. But when you say that all know God exists, and I reject it in my unrighteousness. I don't see how that's anything other than, yeah, I know God exists, I just don't care about God. I don't see how it's anything other than that. I just don't believe in God for the same kinds of reasons that I don't believe in like the tooth fairy or whatever.
Do you want me to respond to that, or are you just telling me that that's
Well, I
how
just
you
want
feel?
you to tell me what you mean by I reject God in my unrighteousness.
Yeah, well, that's what the Bible says. And so, obviously, as a Christian, I believe that the Bible is correct. So, if the Bible says one thing and you say another, obviously, I should believe the Bible over you, right? And so, I believe what the Bible means there is that you care about your pride or your sin. You care more about something besides God than you do about God.
Well,
And
because I
so,
don't think God exists.
because, hmm?
Yeah, because I don't think God exists. Like, I'm not afraid of
Okay, let me ask
lightning
you.
because I know how lightning works. I don't have to worry. I never do make sacrifices to Zeus. And maybe I should because I'm scared of like no, I have no good reason to think that Zeus has anything to do with lightning. And so
Yeah.
um
Okay, well, let me ask you. If God made himself totally aware or totally apparent to you, such that you could not deny it,
you can't
would you worship him?
no, not necessarily.
Right. Why
Because I
not?
because I find him to be a moral monster. Now, if God told me, well,
Exactly.
if you fucking don't, you're gonna burn in hell for eternity, then under that type of coercion, I'd have no choice to. But
Yeah.
there's the morality of that is hideous and completely illogical.
Right. So you dislike God, right? I mean, isn't that kind of what we would expect? You dislike the proposition that God exists, just like the woman dislikes the proposition that her husband is cheating on her. So she suppresses the knowledge because she
I
very
don't
much.
have the knowledge. See, you're conflating rejecting with not knowing. And the Bible claims that I know it and reject it, but you're trying to use an example of the woman is psychologically incapable of really knowing it, even though she doesn't necessarily have a good excuse. So there's two, you're not
Mhm.
giving me, it sounds like you're not um, giving me the actual biblical description of what my unbelief status is.
Your unbelief status is that you know on some level and you reject it, or you suppress that knowledge. I should
Well,
say
then
you know.
then you have to say that all atheists are liars then, because
Well,
I claim I
they're
don't
true
know it
suppress.
at all.
I mean, do you think that that woman, if you asked her, "Hey, is your husband faithful?" and she says, "Yes, of course of course my husband is faithful." Do you think that she's actually lying?
No, because this is like,
Right.
do you know who Jean
That's
Piaget was?
no. But just to be clear,
Piaget's the guy that
no,
developed
that,
the stages of cognitive development. So you can take a really little kid, and you can take 2 glasses of
yeah.
water, and you can get the kid to agree that both glasses of water have the exact same amount of water in them. But then what you do is you pour one of them into a really skinny glass, so the water goes up higher. But they saw you pour the water in, they saw the amount of water before. Kids at a certain young age are just cognitively incapable. Because then, sorry, I skipped a thing. You ask them, do these have the same amount of water in them? And they say, no, that one has more water, which is just false. And so, like, your example is
Right.
not an example of somebody knowing what the truth is and then saying, I know it's true, I just don't want that. That's a kind of rejection. Your example with the woman is more like the example with the kid. The information's here. They don't know it. They're not rejecting it. And there's just whatever, there's some kind of barrier there where they just can't, uh, the, it's not known. That's the only best way I can put it.
Well, just to be clear, maybe I misspoke, but my position is that the atheist is like the woman. So the atheist, as a general rule, there might be exceptions, but I think as a general rule,
Yep.
the
That's
atheist,
not what the
when
Bible
they say
says.
that
The
they
Bible
don't.
says, I know God exists and I reject it.
No, it says you suppress it. Says that you suppress the truth. It's like that woman suppresses the
But
truth.
it says that I know God exists.
Yeah, the woman knows that her husband is cheating
No, no, she
on
doesn't.
some level. Well, I think that she does. I think on some level she does know. She's seen the indicators. She's seen him hiding his phone. She's seen the signs. So on some level, she really does know what's going on, but she suppresses it.
Yeah, but she's not lying. You can say
I
you're lying to yourself, but that's not the
yeah.
same thing as she knows what the truth is and she's saying otherwise. That would be a lie.
And that's exactly what I think atheists are doing. So when you ask me,
No,
Dar-
okay, so you do think I'm a liar.
no, 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 no. Exactly the opposite. When you ask me, Darwin, do you think that I'm lying? My answer is no. I don't think that you're lying to me. Just like that, if she said my husband's faithful because she suppressed. So I think that's
Your voice is very robotic right now.
it's a,
You're cutting in and out.
yeah. Give me a second. Let me try and come off Wi-Fi. Is that cool?
Sounds good right now, actually.
Okay. Well, I just came off Wi-Fi. Is this any better?
It sounds fine. Um,
Okay.
like we're kind of going in circles on the lying thing. Like I got more stuff.
Yeah.
You're gonna say the same
Well,
thing,
you
and I'm gonna say
understand.
the same thing.
Well, you knew that was going to happen when you asked about it, right?
No, I didn't know what was gonna happen.
Okay. All right.
Um. Oh, actually, I haven't. So, do you think that you know what the content of my mind is? Because to claim that I'm
Well,
suppressing
not.
the truth, I think you would have to make that claim. I think that's way too bold.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that alone I would know, right? But if God, who obviously would know, tells me the content of your mind in respect to one thing, then I think that that's reliable, don't you?
If
Hypothetically,
if
if
God
that,
hypothetically has the power to do that,
yeah,
and it says so in a book that
yeah.
I suppress the truth, then it's reasonable to believe it. No, I don't. I don't think the logic leap there is way too extraordinary. Can you
Can you
justify that? Um,
why it's
can you?
not?
No.
You can't explain why there that doesn't follow?
Why? What doesn't follow?
Well, it sounded like
Like
you were saying that
hypothetically, if
God,
God has the power to do anything,
yeah.
therefore a book says a particular thing, therefore it's likely to be true. No, that doesn't, or that it is true. No, that doesn't follow.
Do
I
you
mean,
think
you
that
you
you
kind of
could,
said you believe what the Bible says because God
yeah,
has the power to do what it says in that verse. But that's
yeah.
not a reason to think that the verse is even true or anything like that.
So so in respect to why I believe that I know what you think, in respect to this one thing, do you think that you can steel man why I believe that? Because that was not a steel man at all. Do you think you can you steel man it?
Well, I was just going off of what you said because what you said is I believe the Bible. God does have the
Yeah.
would have the knowledge or the ability to know that you know He exists, and the Bible says so. Therefore, that's why you believe it. I think that's what you said, and I
Well,
think that that's how I put it.
is there a relation between God and the Bible, or is the Bible completely independent of God and God doesn't have anything to do with the Bible? On my view,
On your view, you think that Scripture is inspired? I would assume.
of course, right? So it's not just that there's a Bible and then there's
But,
also
but that's just a
and you read this
presupposition about
book
about the
and then
Bible. That's not a. It's you haven't given me any
it's a
kind
belief
of reason
system. I
to.
mean,
You're very robotic again. I'm sorry. Like if I'm cutting you off, it's because your voice is coming in and out badly.
yeah, you did just cut out. I can drop out and come back in on a different browser. It might be better if I do that. Do you want to try that?
No, because it sounds good right now. Like if it only happens once every 2 minutes, that's not that big of
Oh,
a deal. Um. Okay.
yeah, sorry about that. You can pull back up Wi-Fi. Give me a second. Hopefully the
Yeah,
things will even out. My connection is not always the best up here. I apologize.
that's fine. Can you hear me? Because I'll ask my next thing if you can hear me fine.
Sorry, are you there? I went on to
Yeah,
Wi-Fi and I lost you for a minute. Are you
that's
there?
fine. Yeah, I can
Okay.
hear you.
Sorry
Sounds good.
about that.
My next
Okay.
question, I think that we probably don't need to spend really any time on it, because in that video, like at this same point, you put up, and it's from the Bible. It says, "quote His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world." So
Hmm.
my question I had about that is that very obviously is a description of empirical evidence, is it not?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so the reason I wrote that down is because you made the video saying why you shouldn't give evidence to atheists, but then
Yeah.
you show a Bible verse where it says, well, there is evidence. So it's like,
Yeah.
wait, what? Why would you say both? But you did earlier say, like toward the end, oh, if they seem like they're open minded, then go for it. So
Yeah.
is that's basically your response?
Well, yeah, and I'm not saying that there isn't
Okay.
evidence. I think there's obviously an
Yeah, I know,
enormous
but
amount.
but the premise of the video is you shouldn't give atheists evidence.
Yeah,
But
and just
but
to
then
be
you but
clear,
then you invoked the Bible saying there is evidence. So it
yeah,
seemed like it didn't make any sense. But if
yeah,
what you
you
say at
see
the
that,
end of the video
right?
is some atheists are open minded enough, therefore it's fine, then I think I
Yeah,
know your answer. So I don't we don't need to quibble over that point
yeah, no
really at
worries.
all.
Go ahead.
Okay,
I feel like this is more of an interview right now.
a little bit. I mean, like you said, you didn't want it to be super hostile or whatever. Um,
Yeah, it's fine, man. However you want to run it.
okay. So next thing is a quote that you had in that video. I think it was toward the end. Was it's futile because of the worldview.
Yeah,
That's a reason why it's not worth giving an atheist evidence. So
yeah.
I have a kind of like a series of questions. They're um, th- I have leading questions, and then the big one is at the end. So
Okay. I love leading questions. Those are my favorite.
yeah, and I'm not. They're not trying to be loaded necessarily or anything. I mean,
I know
I
you
think
missed
they're in
it.
my favor, but they're not like I'm not going to ask you questions like stupid loaded questions or whatever. So, anyways, first thing would be, um, can two atheists agree on non-theological claims?
Like what? Can you give me an example?
Oh, like can two atheists get together and do science and come to agreement?
Of course.
Okay. Um, can an atheist and a Christian agree on a non-theological claim?
Absolutely.
Okay, what means do they use?
Well, it would depend on the nature of the claim, right? And it would depend on the philosophies of the two people that
Well, they're
are.
non-theological claims, so
Yeah, but that's kind of the whole thing is when I talk about worldview, I kind of think of it as like an operating system, like different computers run off of different operating systems. And so worldview is
yeah.
basically like your code or your assumptions about the way that the world works, and then you interpret all the data that you see through that operating system.
I mean,
And so,
I would say the worldview is just going to be what kinds of conclusions you draw from the data because we all have the same brain and the same access to the same information. So I don't know.
yeah,
I don't actually think that the worldview is actually important here. So I just want to restate the question.
yeah, go
You
ahead.
say that an atheist and a Christian can agree on a non-theological claim. So what means do they use?
Well, like I said, it really depends on the claim and what the atheist is running off of and what the Christian is running off of. So a lot of atheists they're kind of running off of a quasi-religious operating system, and I would say that they don't even realize it. And I think maybe that's because most atheists are raised religiously, so they kind of like have that embedded in their minds, in their cerebellum. I know that's not accurate. I just wanted to say cerebellum.
It's
But yeah,
cerebrum.
Yeah, their cerebrum. So they have this, like, way of thinking. I mean, even language itself causes you to think certain ways. But what I was trying to say is that it really, I think if an atheist were to be truly consistent in their worldview, and they weren't like kind of smuggling in theistic assumptions about the world, I think that the chances of an atheist agreeing with theist about something would greatly diminish. Although it is possible, I'm not saying that it's.
Okay. Okay. You're a theist and I'm an atheist. So,
Yeah,
um, let's have a conversation about the color of this pencil.
sure,
I think it's yellow.
I agree.
What means did we use to arrive to that conclusion?
Well, quite a few, right? And I think that pretty much all of the means
I would say
were.
it looks yellow, and I presuppose that my senses aren't tricking me. Do
You
you
also
have
are.
those same? Do you make those same inferences or assumptions or whatever?
Yeah, but I think there's more. I don't think those are the
Sure,
only ones.
but I don't think it matters if there's more because you're conflating. We're doing the conflating proximate and ultimate. Now, is the reason that my
No, no, no.
ability to see
More,
that
more
it's
something.
yellow because there's a eternal mind? I don't know, but we agree on everything before that step.
Yeah, well,
So
just
my ability to say that it looks yellow hasn't collapsed for any reason.
well, I'm not saying that you can't say things. That's not the argument. What I'm saying is that if you did accept all the implications of what atheism actually means, then I don't think that you could intelligently, or I don't think that you could. I mean, you could technically say it, but I don't think that you would actually think that you could know that sort of thing.
But I am an atheist, and I do think I can know this.
I
I
know,
think
and
what you're I think what you're
that's what
confusing
I was
is
saying.
if your worldview is false, then no other worldview can account for truth claims or whatever, something like that. Okay, well, I don't have your worldview, so I don't know. I don't get why you get to tell me if my worldview is false, then nobody else's. Like, I get that that's your worldview, but it's not
Yeah.
mine. So I don't get why you get to say the logical conclusion of the negation of my worldview means that everybody would have to accept the negation of my worldview, and nobody would be able to agree that the pencil is yellow. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. Well, let me try to help out here, and I probably am not going to be able to fully explain this, but I'm going to try. Okay.
Sure.
So, a huge mistake that I find many, many, many atheists, pretty much every atheist makes, is that they think that if there's no God, then there's like no implications to that. Like the world would look exactly the way that it does, and we can make sense of the world, and we should expect all this order and this complexity, and I should expect my senses to work, and I should expect the uniformity of nature, and all these things. They just like everything that I expect as a theist because I believe that there's a God who ordered everything. The atheist is like, I have all that stuff too, and I don't need God. Okay. And what I'm saying is actually, if you were consistent, if you cut off that first branch, like if you remove a tree from its soil, the tree dies. Everything on the tree dies. And God is the soil that you need in order to get all that other stuff. So I'm not saying that you can't like say, hey, I believe this, right? Like you can believe that the universe is intelligible and that pencils exist and that you have reasoning and these sorts of things. You can do that. I can't stop you. I'm just saying that that's not consistent. I believe that that is not consistent with atheism. I believe that
Yeah,
you're being
but that's the logical conclusion of the negation of your worldview. The negation of your worldview isn't my worldview.
So what do you mean by that? Unpack that for me.
Um, I'm not. How do I say that? Like you say, if my worldview is false, then all of these problems arise.
Yeah.
But you're conflating the negation of your worldview with what other people's worldviews are. My
Okay.
worldview isn't the negation of your worldview because, according to my worldview, I do believe that we can come to agreement on things because I don't think it's grounded in the mind of God. You're just
Yeah.
telling me that I have to
Should.
accept the negation of your worldview. But no, My
Yeah.
worldview isn't like I know you're a theist, but my
Yeah.
worldview isn't the same thing as the negation of your worldview. That almost sounds like a contradiction, but
Okay,
I don't see
so
it that way at all.
let me try this. This might help a little bit. So there are certain beliefs that are not important. Imagine a tree, okay? I just mentioned a tree. So some things on that tree are not as important to the tree's health as other things. For example, if you go and you take a leaf off of the end of the tree, then the tree is fine, right? You remove a leaf and the tree is fine. But if you take the tree out of the soil that it is in, the tree dies, okay? So
Yeah, I
some things are
agree.
yeah. So some things are way more important to the life of that tree than other things. Okay. So the little twigs at the end are not very important. So some beliefs in the same way are not very important at all to our other beliefs, right? Like, so if I believe that there are 6,000 blades of grass in my front yard and it turns out I'm wrong, that doesn't affect a bunch of other things that I believe, right? But if I believe that the laws of logic don't exist, okay, something like that.
Which I don't. Well, I mean, I kind of do, but I kind of don't.
Okay. Like if I think that truth doesn't exist, right? If truth is like purely subjective or something like that, that is a fundamental belief that's going to change a lot of things. And what I'm trying to say is that I believe that God is the most fundamental belief. So when you
Yeah, but I
turn off,
don't.
I know, but I'm telling you, you're asking me about why I'm saying this. So I'm trying to explain where I'm coming from. So I believe that when you turn off that God, when you take the tree out of the soil, the tree dies. So everything that you're saying you believe, I'm saying, I understand that you believe that stuff, but actually you shouldn't be believing that stuff. You haven't thought about the actual implications of what
But
it means for
you're
God.
so telling me that if the atheist had my worldview and then realized that the negation of my worldview is true, then they would fall into whatever this is, modal collapse or
Well,
or total
okay.
solipsism or whatever. But I don't have your
Just,
worldview.
just to be clear, you do agree with me that beliefs can have implications, right?
I don't
Like
see how
beliefs.
that can't be the case.
Okay, so beliefs stack on top of each other, right? So if I ask you, hey, why do you believe this? You're going to give me another belief that undergirds that first belief. And then I say, okay, well, why do you believe that? You're going to give me another belief that supports that belief. And I said, why do you believe that? And you're going to give me another belief that supports that belief, right? So beliefs work as a system where there are some beliefs that are very much at the top and not that important. And then the further down you go, the more I ask why, the closer we get to bedrock. And if you affect that bedrock, you're going to affect all the beliefs above that bedrock. Do you agree? Do you understand what I mean?
Kind of.
Kind of you understand or kind of you agree?
Um, I would say I understand probably would be better.
Okay, so you don't agree?
Like I get what you're saying. Like
Yeah.
if you fail to believe the bedrock assumption, then uh, higher order thoughts or whatever collapse. I'm fine with that, but I don't have your bedrock assumption.
Yeah, I know. And yet you still have a bunch of the beliefs that only make sense with that bedrock assumption. That's what
According
I'm
to you, my
yeah.
worldview is that
Yeah,
theism isn't required for that.
I know, and that's the whole argument. Is it required or isn't it? I know you believe that it's not, and I believe that it is, and that's the transcendental argument in a nutshell. Is are
Yeah.
these things, do you need God to get these things, or can you get these things without God? Of course,
So
all the that you can.
I have some questions on this, and they're actually my next questions, but
Sure.
we haven't finished out the thing I was uh, doing here. And here's what I want to do. I have a few more questions. I'm going to skip a few of them, and then we're going to set aside some time where only you're allowed to ask questions because I've done almost all of it for
And
this
have I
conversation.
all your questions?
What's that?
Have I answered all of your questions so far? Straightforward, in a straightforward manner.
The there was one earlier that I didn't really think so, but now I forgot what it was because I have been deleting all my questions as I asked them. Why the hell did I do that?
Mark for
Um,
them.
so
If I don't answer a question sufficiently, or you feel like I'm moving around it or whatever, let me know.
that's fine. So That's actually going to happen right now because I feel like we skirted this thing. So I asked you, a theist and an atheist can agree on a non-theological claim. What means do they use?
Yeah. Well, like I said, it depends, but I can just name a means for sake of the argument. I mean, let's say that the theist and the atheist are looking at that pencil, right? You and I are looking at that pencil, okay? And we both agree that the pencil is yellow. So the means that they use would be the two things that you said, and then there would be other things as well, like the reliability of their their reasoning, right? They would be assuming that their reasoning was sound on some level, that they could correctly identify things. They would be assuming the intelligibility of the world, that you could like identify certain things. They're assuming laws of logic. They're assuming that their memory is correct because their idea of what yellow is comes from their memory. They learned it at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a whole bunch of assumptions that go into that. And in order for us to agree, we would both pretty much be required to be assuming all those things. Now, did I
Okay.
adequately and sufficiently answer your question that time?
Yeah, I think so. And then my next question, and I think I probably agree basically with that. And then my next question would be, now you said it's futile to argue with atheists because of their worldview, but
Yeah.
actually we've got to this point where we can agree on countless things. And then
Super.
the final part to this would be, why does the ability to do this all of a sudden vanish when the question is, does God exist?
Yeah, because one worldview is presupposing that you can get all this stuff without God, and that all this stuff comes without God. So let me give you an example. Like if two detectives walk into a room, once again, one detective is looking at the body, and let's say there's clear evidence of a murder, but one detective just flat out is assuming that murders don't happen, that all of those things, all the indicators of a murder, like bloody footprints leaving the scene, self-defense wounds. They think all that stuff tracks just as good, if not better, on a naturalist explanation than like somebody did it, right? So if you're the detective that thinks it was a murder, you really shouldn't be discussing the evidence with this other detective until you basically get them to stop being a naturalist about the nature of murders. And that's what my point is. Does
Yeah, I
that
don't
make
agree
sense?
with that at all. I mean, like, so for example, even
Mm-hmm.
with that example, we could find a body,
Yeah.
um, and we could find like a knife sticking out of the body or whatever,
Yeah.
and like there'd be all this like evidence. Well,
Yeah.
we'd be able. It's actually this is actually a very apt analogy for God because was a personal agent behind it or not? Now, one guy agrees that personal agents don't do this kind of thing, but think of all the things they can come into agreement on. That the knife killed the woman among all the other things, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
almost like the vast majority of the particular like scenario and relationships
Hmm.
within that situation or whatever can be agreed upon by
Yeah.
them, except for some ultimate thing. So there's innumerable proximate causes they can all agree on, a singular ultimate cause that they can't agree on.
Right.
And so
Uh,
to say it's futile to talk to these kinds of people, I think that's pretty ridiculous considering
well,
the staggering amount that you actually can agree on them with.
just to be clear, I didn't say you can't agree with an atheist on anything, but the video is in the context of discussing a very particular thing about evidence of God, right? So you could agree with that other detective who's just assuming flat out that murders do not happen, or that any evidence that you would think is good evidence of a murder, they're going to interpret that as evidence of natural causes like wind and rain and stuff like that, right? So you can agree with that guy about what caused the woman to die, but any evidence that you bring forward that has to do with why you think it's a murder, that person is going to reinterpret that evidence as evidence for naturalism. And so that's the key point that I'm trying to make here. I'm not saying that Christian and atheist can't agree about certain things in the universe. I can't I'm not saying that like I can point to a pencil and you're not going to agree, okay, that's a pencil. But whenever it comes to interpreting that evidence, especially if it's in reference to God, we're going to interpret the evidence completely differently based on our assumptions. And that's my point. I mean, look at what happened in this conversation with you and I. We're talking about design, and you're like, yeah, all that stuff like complexity and order, that all tracks perfectly fine with naturalism, right? I mean, that's case in point.
Well, I'm not 100% sure what that had to do with anything. So, okay,
Just
I got, um, like three more, and that's it. And then I'm gonna give like 20 minutes or something for you to just bombard me with whatever
didn't want to
questions
go for
you
two
want.
hours. We're going for 2 hours right now. We haven't even got
Yeah,
to super.
probably.
That's fine.
There aren't very many super chats, but anyways, another quote from the video. You said atheism is self-refuting because they have no grounds for it. And you list a bunch of things, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to talk about a couple things.
I'm so glad you brought this up.
Do you know that presuppositions aren't justified? Like by definition?
So let me get you to elaborate on what you mean by that, just to make sure.
They're presupposed. They're literally not justified.
Yeah, that's not what I mean when I say that. I do agree with you, but what I'm saying is that if you start with a bad presupposition, everything that you build off of it is also going to be unjustified.
So that's actually my next thing. Do
Yeah.
you know how to compare the epistemic value of two presuppositions?
Well, I don't know how you do it. I mean, I know I think I know how I do it. You want to give me an example of what you mean? I don't think I would
Sure.
phrase
So
it
I
that.
would say, right. So if somebody said, I believe that the necessary precondition for intelligibility is God,
Yeah.
and then another person, well, let's not even do God. Let's like I don't know. Let's say one person says, I believe the necessary precondition for intelligibility is,
Right.
that's literally, and then the other person says, oh, I think it's that reality exists. Well,
Yeah.
the first claim is completely incoherent. And so I'm not saying that the second claim is true, but
Right.
I have something I can actually work with, right? So I think we can elevate the epistemic value of the second one.
Hmm.
So if one is completely incoherent, that could be an example. If one of them like literally is a contradiction, then you could say it's false. You know,
What if it's self-refuting?
presuppositions are the kinds of things where they're like you say they're sort of unfalsifiable, which
Yeah.
is kind of true. But if something is a contradiction, I think we could say that, well, it definitely can't be that,
Yeah. What if it's
right?
self-refuting the presupposition? Like, what
Yeah,
if?
that would be like a contradiction.
Well, yeah, it's like a contradiction, but it's not necessarily a contradiction. So something can be self-refuting, but it could actually still be the case. So, for example, I could believe that my reasoning. Sorry, I can't really believe that my reasoning is unsound, because to believe that my reasoning is unsound would undermine all of my beliefs, including the belief that my reasoning was unsound. But it still could be the case that my reasoning is in fact unsound, and you would probably argue that my reasoning is unsound, right? Because I'm a theist, crazy Christian. So just because something is self-refuting doesn't necessarily mean that it's untrue, but we shouldn't believe in things that are self-refuting. Does that make sense?
I think so for the most part. So then what would you say? So I'll just go back to my earlier question and then I only have one left. So how do you compare the epistemic value of two presuppositions?
Well, I think you look at the presuppositions and you ask yourself, what are the implications of these presuppositions? And this is kind of the thing that atheists miss, in my view, which is that they want to assume all these second order things. They're like assuming that their reasoning is sound. They're assuming that their senses work. They're assuming uniformity of nature. They're assuming all these things that they need to assume in order to make sense of the world. But they don't assume the one thing that they need to assume in order for all those assumptions to even make sense in the first place, which is God. And they think like, I can just have all
But
these
that's
things.
just a
Like, have
claim.
three.
That's just your presupposition. So you said the
Well,
atheist
it's whether it's
presupposition can't be true because it's not my presupposition.
well, of course, it's not just the claim. There's actual arguments and justifications and rationality for all this stuff. I'm not just claiming it. I'm just telling you what the argument is right now.
Well, at that point, that was all you did. But
Well,
you
do you
go.
want to talk about tag? How deep do you want to go? I can assure you that it's not just me claiming it. I can assure you there are many justifications that I have written out painstakingly.
I've heard a million. I've done the tag argument a million times. I'm gonna get my part over with. I just realized there was actually a second set of questions, but it was only two questions I didn't get to. But I'm not gonna do them. Not for now.
Okay.
So among the things you said, atheists have no grounds for. You said that we have no grounds for the belief that our reasoning is sound, right?
Right. Yeah.
I don't think you do either.
Okay.
Can you know Satan isn't deceiving you?
Can I know?
Yeah.
Well, it's an epistemic question. So I can't know it. No.
Sure, but you can presuppose it. And I'll just
Yeah.
presuppose that all of the proximate causes we agree about are the case.
Yeah.
And I'll be agnostic about the supposed ultimate cause for it. Or I could just rest the ultimate cause in a layer of something that we both agree on, like that the universe exists or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just presupposed. So
Yeah.
when people say that, oh well, atheism is self-refuting because it can't do blank, like people conflate that their presupposition is anything other than a presupposition. I can just make my own presupposition, and yours is not more true or more false than mine. Again, there's an epistemic value to each of them that we could go over, and maybe one of them's literally a contradiction, and then we'd have something to work with. But
Yeah.
um,
So,
but
so
in
let's talk
Christianity,
about that. Can we talk about that?
yeah, and then whenever you want to start just asking me questions.
Did you get through all of yours?
No, but that's fine.
Are you sure? I don't mind.
Do you not have any in mind?
No, I definitely have some in mind, but
I
yeah.
mean, I'm just trying to be fair.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. So when we talk about presuppositions, this is something that I see a lot of atheists doing. They think like that they can just give themselves presuppositions and like they're doing the exact same thing that I'm doing. And so I'm just like, oh yeah, let me just presuppose this and presuppose that. And they're like, well, I can do that too. I'm just not going to presuppose God. I think that they're fundamentally misunderstanding like what we're getting at, which is that certain things need to be the case in order for other things to be the case. Okay, so for example, even though it could be the case that Satan is messing with me and giving me false beliefs and that sort of thing, I should never believe that Satan is doing that, because that would undermine my ability to form beliefs, including the belief that Satan is messing with, right? So that would be a self-defeating belief. So I shouldn't start with that. I shouldn't believe that. Would you agree with me?
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call it self-defeating. What I would say is it would reduce your worldview to a point where it would become totally nihilistic, basically,
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah, well, it would give me a good defeater for all of my beliefs, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, so then that would include a good defeater for the belief even that Satan is messing with me, wouldn't it?
Well, you're not believing it.
I said, should I believe that Satan is messing with me and causing me to form false beliefs because he hates me? Should I believe that?
Yeah, I get what you're saying now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So I think that if you start with no God, that's kind of like starting with Satan is messing with me and causing me to believe all the things that I believe. So imagine I said I'm going to start with this belief that Satan is messing with me and causing me to believe false things. That's like my fundamental foundational belief. And then I'm going to assume that I can form true beliefs and that I can know things about the world and that my senses are going to be reliable. You'd be like, wait. Those beliefs don't work together, bro. Like the first belief is kind of important. That first belief is in great tension with all these other beliefs that you're building on top of it. You need to get rid of that first belief, right? You see that?
You lost me kind of with the last part of it. 'Cause I don't know what you're talking about throwing out or whatever. Like
Yeah.
what's intention? Are you still talking about the Satan thing?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
I'm not telling you that you should
yeah.
think
Well,
that
I
Satan is, but I'm saying you have to presuppose that that is not the case.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to say about atheism is the belief, like if you were to believe that no God exists, okay? And I'm not saying that you do, but what I'm saying is we need to believe that just like okay, so Satan either is messing with me or he isn't. I need to
Mhm.
believe that he's not messing with me. Okay, I actually do need to kind of like have that belief.
Yep.
In a way, right? I need to believe that somebody's not like tinkering with my mind all the time and causing me to believe false things. I actually do need to believe that. In the same way, I'm arguing that we need to believe that God exists. And if you believe that God does not exist or you don't have the belief in God, that actually cuts you off and undermines all the beliefs that you're building on top of that.
Why
Okay,
is
so
that?
hmm?
Why is that?
Because of what God gives you ontologically, because God is an intelligent agent. So let me give you an example. All right. So if you and I are sitting in a car and we need to drive somewhere, all right, like we need to drive from Texas to Idaho, okay, and we have different beliefs about how the car came to be. So I believe that the car was made by a mechanic who knew what he was doing, and you believe that the car was made by a tornado. Do you understand? Like, would you agree with me that one of the like you shouldn't believe that we're going to get to Idaho?
No, because we both are sitting in a functional car.
We don't know if it's going to function. We just know it looks like a car. I believe it's a car because it was made by a mechanic. You believe that what you're sitting in was made by a tornado, a mindless tornado.
Yeah, but my senses are telling me that it has all the same properties that functioning cars have.
Well, do you think that if a car was made by a mindless tornado, it would have it would function? Do you think that would be likely?
I don't believe that, and so in this hypothetical, I wouldn't be that other hypothetical person.
Right. So that person is being unrational. If I said, "Do you think we're going to get to Idaho based on your prior belief that this car was made by a tornado?" That person should say, "Absolutely not," shouldn't they?
But what if they presuppose that a tornado can create a functioning car? That's not
Then
your presupposition, but what if it's theirs?
yeah, well then that's exactly what I would want to challenge them on. I would be like, "Well, don't you understand what a tornado is? Like, do you really think that that's rational to believe that a tornado could make something like that? A functioning car, like something unintentional?" I mean, that's where I would want to press them is right there. I mean, isn't that where you would want to press them?
If they made that claim, yeah. But like,
Yeah.
I would ask a theist, how does your worldview account for, like, how does God make anything exist?
Well, how does God do it? I don't know how God does it.
Okay, I don't know how the tornado did it, but I just presuppose that tornadoes can do that.
Yeah. Do you think that that's a rational thing to believe?
No, because they can't give any account for it, just like you can't.
Well, the difference here, I think, is that a tornado doesn't have a mind, whereas a mechanic does. So, if we want to believe that the car is going to get us to Idaho, we should also believe that the car was made by someone intelligent who knew what they were doing when it comes to making cars, right? So, even if it's somebody intelligent, but they don't know what it takes car, like I tell you that my 2 year old made the car, right? We probably still shouldn't believe that if we really want to think that the car is going to get us to Idaho. You know, so if we're going to get in that car and expect it to get us to Idaho, we kind of need to believe that the car was made by someone intelligent because that's the best explanation for why we should expect the car to get us to Idaho. Sorry if that was a bit of a word salad.
You're you're just it sounds like you're just saying both people, they have different, it's like you're saying they have different presuppositions,
Yeah.
but they both agree that a tornado can't make a functioning car, but one person believes it. Therefore, they
Yeah.
shouldn't believe that. Like,
Let me
you're inserting your belief into them. That's a
Mhm.
weird sentence. And it's just like I think you should just say no. Their presupposition is that minds can create, or that tornadoes can create functioning cars.
Yeah,
And it's like,
but
okay, why is that presupposition false?
yeah, because of the nature of what a tornado is, and it's
They
not
would
necessarily
they would
false.
just claim that that is the nature of a tornado.
I mean, anyone can claim anything, right? Like anyone can claim
Uh
anything.
huh.
I can claim that I believe that Satan is messing with me all the time and that he's causing me to believe false things. And then I can also claim that all of my beliefs are totally reliable, right? Like I can claim contradictory things or things that are in great tension with each other. I'm not saying people can't make irrational claims. I'm saying that people shouldn't be irrational. And and by extension, I'm saying that atheists are being irrational when they say that the God cannot exist, and they can get all the same stuff that theists believe in.
I mean, my biggest problem was sort of when you said, "Oh well, that other presupposition can't account for anything."
Mm-hmm.
Well, I asked you how your presupposition does, and you said you have no idea because you don't know how God does any of
But
these things. And
how
then
he does,
and then it just seemed like you sort of equivocated and extended that to, well, I do know how a mechanic does things.
yeah. So okay, let me be clear. Like I don't need to know how a mechanic puts a car together in order to be justified in believing that if a car is put together by a mechanic, then I have pretty good reason to
Yeah,
believe
but
that the car is going to be reliable. I don't have to
yeah, but
know how.
that's a claim predicated on evidence. We have we have a shared experience where we know that mechanics put together functional things.
Mhm.
So I don't have a shared experience that I know that a supernatural. We don't even have a shared experience that the supernatural is even real. Um, but we definitely do, so we don't have a shared experience that a disembodied mind is the reason things are the way they are here. So what's the account for anything?
What do you mean by what is the account? You mean what's
Well,
it?
I said I wasn't going to do this, but you said it was okay, which was ask my other questions, but they're directly related to what we're talking about here. So
Yeah.
I think this is okay. But in a different video you made, I can't remember what the hell it was called, but the quote is, um, "Oh, why God of the gaps isn't a fallacy," was the video.
Oh yeah.
You say in there,
Yeah.
you can't
It
explain
is
this.
a fallacy.
Sorry, you were kind of roboting for a second. What?
God of the gaps is a fallacy. But what I'm saying is most atheists think that they're hearing God of the gaps during
Right.
these arguments or not.
But
That
it's
was my
yeah. I'm not going to contend with
yeah. Go ahead.
whether I'm not. I'm going to say you must accept that it, and you must delete that video because you lied. No. So the quote in there is, "You can't explain this on your theory, so my theory is the one we should consider because your theory fails to account, but
Yeah.
mine has no problem." So you is the atheist. Me, mine, my is you in there. How does your theory account for anything?
Yeah. So my theory of theism accounts for the idea that we can rely on our reasoning, for example, because God made us in his image in order to accurately interpret the world to an extent. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect, but God cares about us. So he made us so that we could, to a good extent, rely on our minds. So there's the account of why we should be able to rely on our reasoning. Why would the laws of nature continue to hold? Like, why is uniformity of nature a thing on my theory? Because once again, God cares about his creatures. And so he wants us to be able to live in a world with order that is not chaotic. So he creates stable laws and keeps them from being violated unless he wants to perform a miracle, of course, which is meant for him to signal to us something very important has happened. So that's my account of why we would have and expect uniformity of nature. I mean, is this what you're asking me for? Should I keep going?
Um, I think I can interject here for a second. So the quote I took from the video to me seems to be um, trying to reason with some sort of phenomena or observation, right? You can't explain blank with your theory. I can, so mine is the one we should consider, right? So
Yeah.
we're not talking about like something as incredible and hard to deal with as like why does the universe even exist? We're talking about um to me it sounds like we're just describing some matter of the fact thing in the universe, right? Like
Well, hang on a second.
why do we live in a universe that has complex life in it, for example, right? That's
Yeah.
not the same
Well,
thing as why does the universe even exist or anything like that.
well, it's my video, so it needs to be about what I meant, not about how you're interpreting what I meant, right?
Well, yeah, but it's not like
Well, yeah.
I know what you meant and it's not what I said, but I'm going to say what I said anyways.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying I am talking about those really big questions, obviously.
Okay.
Well, maybe it's not obvious. I guess it wasn't obvious, but I am talking about those really big questions. I'm not talking about the day to day, like what causes grass to grow better. You know, is it God or is it not God? I'm talking about what's the best explanation for fine tuning? What's the best explanation for laws of logic? What's the best explanation for the beginning of the universe? These sorts of things, you know? The big
Sure, but
crowd.
those what everything you just said does sound like an example of what I meant. Because what I said I wasn't talking about was like why does the universe even exist like in the first place? You know, like why is there something rather than nothing
Yeah.
kind of
Okay.
thing. But like so let's take like the universe has like finely tuned constants or whatever, or the universe has complex life in it,
Yeah.
or like, whatever. So let me just say chemistry and physics did it. I have now accounted for it.
Yeah, I mean, anybody can say anything, right? Like I could say the watch on my table that I haven't used did it, right? Um, like anybody can say that something accounts for something, but
Sure.
the question is, what's the justification for it, that claim, right? So of course you can say that, but what's the
Well,
justification for it?
well, can you justify yours?
Can I justify why I think that God is the better explanation for fine tuning versus not God? Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, we kind of did that at the beginning for a long time. Um,
To me, that's a true dichotomy, and yes, I can.
man, should we go back to that, or is there something better? I feel like that's kind of the only. I feel like that's
I want
kind of
to.
where we're gonna end up. Um, yeah, go ahead.
So you're an anti-realist.
Am I?
I think so. I thought I heard you say you're a moral anti-realist. Is
Oh
that
yeah,
right?
moral, but morals don't have anything to do with fine tuning. I don't think.
I'm switching the conversation.
Oh sure.
I care a lot about morality. It's a huge reason why I stopped being an atheist. So I'm just curious about your thoughts here. Do you actually think that there aren't moral truths, or do you think that that's a philosophy that you've adopted as a response to your other beliefs about whether or not God exists? I mean, like when you hear about something terrible that has happened, you know, like child child trafficking, we'll say. I guess we're on
Yeah.
YouTube. So probably be careful about my language here, but child trafficking. Do you is your reaction to stuff like that there is no actual like truth of the matter of whether it's right or wrong, like intuitively?
I think it's true. So I would say something like I believe it's like analytically true that so like you could say human trafficking is wrong by definition, and then it's analytically true. I could say that children don't wish to be trafficked, so when you go against their interests, that causes them suffering, and suffering is the kind of thing we define as being wrong. So it's a wrong action by definition.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that that's all it is, though? I mean, like, if I was like, oh, like if human beings got together in 10 years and we decided to just redefine some things, do you, and we just decided to redefine these things in such a way that human trafficking wasn't wrong, do you think that it would no longer be wrong, and it's only wrong as a matter of the way that we talk about it and define things?
Um, Not exactly, because there would be a sense in which, like, I just don't think that could ever happen, because literally we just wouldn't even be humans anymore. So this is gonna sound kind of weird, but
Okay,
this is something I've kind of fleshed out and thought about before. So I mean, as a Christian, I assume you believe in sexual moral ethics, right?
of course.
Do you think it's morally wrong when dogs hump each other,
No,
like two male dogs?
no, I don't.
Okay, so I think that the human species is a species that, um, because of its cooperative social um, characteristics, properties, or whatever, and our incredible cognition and our ability to perceive and avoid pain and describe it, and the way that the circle of empathy extends to other people and even like other animals, things like that. These hypotheticals where it's like, but what if humans got together and then decided that like all these things that humans currently think are wrong would be right? My basic response to that, and it seems kind of like a cop out answer, is they wouldn't be humans. I don't care. In the same way that you don't think it's morally wrong when two male dogs hump each other, even though you don't think humans should do it. They're dogs. I don't care. They wouldn't be people. I don't care. If aliens go around genociding the entire universe except us, I don't really care, because
Yeah,
that's not part of my ethic, because I care about humans,
yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing, right? Because from that, it sounds like you think that morality really is just whatever you care about. And to me, I feel
Well, I don't. Well, no, because I
yeah,
don't think
first
that
your mouth.
I mean, almost in a way, but I think that I have an experience that virtually every human who isn't a complete psychopath shares.
Well, I think the vast majority of humans have the intuition that these sort of things are actually wrong, regardless of how we talk about it, regardless of opinion. Do you think that that's not true?
Sorry, say that again.
I think that the vast majority of human beings, if not all of them, except maybe psychopaths, they all share the intuition. I would argue that things like child trafficking are wrong, regardless of how we talk about them, regardless of the language we use, regardless of whether or not we happen to form a
Sure.
different.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think that's predicated and based on the idea that, even if human beings literally couldn't speak, they would still find being subjected to some kind of misery like that literally intolerable. And so
Yeah.
it's based in the natural, just like literally the human condition. It's based in that, for simplicity's sake.
So you think that, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth here. Are you telling me that you think that human beings find this sort of thing wrong because they have empathy and they don't want it to be done to themselves, that sort of thing?
That's a huge starting point, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, think that if you were to give all human beings a pill where they didn't have empathy, and so it caused them to just go around doing atrocities like that, without any moral knowledge or whatever, without any empathy, I would say it was still wrong. You know what I mean? Like I feel like
I
it's not.
think I can agree, because what you would have done is subverted the actual source.
Yeah, yeah. So what I'm trying to say is I don't think it's the empathy that causes something to be right or wrong. I think that obviously human beings have a conscience, and I would say it's like a God-given conscience of God wants us to know right from wrong. The same way if you have children, I don't think you have children, do you?
No,
Um,
working
but
on it.
yeah, working on it. Awesome.
Yeah, I got a sock I can show you.
No thanks. Um, I have three, and I try to make sure that they know the rules, right? Because the rules are set up because I care about them, right? So I make rules that are meant for their good. Things like don't go in the street, or if you're going to go into the street, look both ways before you do, and don't
Yeah.
put forks in these sorts of things, right? So the rules are for their good. Um, yeah.
So let me ask you a question. Can you tell me something that so you believe that morals are real? So can you
Yes.
give me an example of a moral fact or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a fact that like child trafficking is wrong, that murder is wrong, these
Okay.
sorts of things.
Does God know that murder is wrong?
Well, God knows everything. So if murder is wrong, of course he knows it.
Then if so to me it sounds like you believe that moral facts exist. So if the moral facts exist, then we can know that the moral facts exist, and then we don't even then God isn't even required.
Yeah,
God's not even the source of morality. At best, you
yeah.
could argue, well, if God didn't tell Moses on the mountain, then we wouldn't know it, but it
hmm
could, in principle, be known.
You know,
But it doesn't come from God. Go
it's
ahead.
funny you bring it up because I actually just did a 4-hour debate with Ben Watkins, who's an atheist, moral realist. So he's a moral realist, not an anti-realist. And it was about this exact thing, whether or not you can ground objective morality or moral realism without God. I mean, the debate was framed as who provides a better grounding between him and he was trying to make that exact move. I would, if you have time, you should definitely check it out. It's a really good debate, I think. But yeah, I did have a lot of arguments that I think showed that you do need God. It's not enough to just like have facts. You need God in order to supply other things, in order for morality to obtain.
But if murder is wrong is a truth, and
Yeah.
God knows the truth, then it doesn't come from God.
Well, that doesn't follow, right? So I can know something and it can also come from me, right? Like I can know that there's a
But that's
hole.
subjective.
What do you mean?
If it's mind dependent, then it's subjective.
Yeah, this is the thorny part about the whole conversation because a lot of people want to say that morality is subjective if it comes from God. And I
Yeah.
understand like why they're saying that. I think the relevant distinction when it comes to that argument is that God is a truth maker and we are not. So when I say that subjective morality is ridiculous, do you need me to unpack what I mean by truth maker? You're making a,
No, I mean, no, it's fine.
okay. So when I scoff at subjective morality, to me, subjective morality is like I have an opinion, and that's what makes something right or wrong. So if I wake up tomorrow and I want to traffic children, then I can do it, and there's nothing actually wrong with it. My preferences just changed, and you have no moral grounds on which to oppose me, right? Like just like I can eat my pizza however I want. I think that that's ridiculous, and that's why people like myself, Christians, scoff at subjective morality because that would all just be like opinion. Human beings, like when I think that something is wrong, it doesn't make it the case. You know, we're not truth makers; we are truth discoverers. We don't make
Mm-hmm.
things true; we discover. Like I didn't make it true that 1 + 1 = 2. I discovered that 1 + 1 = 2. I didn't make it the case that the angles of a triangle are what 90 degrees. I think it's 90 degrees, right?
Of a square are 90 degrees.
Yeah, that's what I meant. A square.
Yeah,
The
right
angles
triangle has
are
one of those.
yeah. I shouldn't have said that. So
Don't worry
the
about it.
the angles of a square are 90 degrees each,
Yeah.
and I didn't make that the case. We kind of like discovered that that was the case. So we are not truth makers, but God,
Mm.
if we could say that he's a subject, he is a truth maker. So if the shape
Yep.
of the earth is round because uh, and God exists, then the way that the earth is because God thinks of it that way. So there's no disconnect between how God thinks about things and how they are, right? So to me, like trying to say, well, that's subjective too, I think is kind of silly because on that case, if that were the case, then like the shape of the earth is subjective and
Yeah,
everything
but
is.
the problem with this is this just kind of sounds like a type of divine command theory.
I
I
understand divine.
believe in a God that creates the true value of morality.
Yeah,
So we
I
happen
am.
to we happen to the God you happen to believe in happens to have said bearing false witness is wrong. There was no reason that your God could not have said that lying under oath is actually the only good thing to like if you're giving a testimony, you should lie. It could your God could have said that, which means it's totally subjective. It's just dependent on his mind. The only thing you can do, I think, for this is say, well, God by definition is good.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I by definition say that the human condition is the objective standard. Now, and so therefore it is good. And then what theists will do is like, okay, well, what if the Nazis had actually won, and then they decide that doing all the horrible things they decided to do was like morally correct or whatever? It's like, okay, what if God said to do it? Then you that like you try to appeal to the human moral instinct that we have.
Yeah.
To say, well, this makes you reduced to this kind of absurdity that even you aren't willing to believe. But theists cower from the having to reconcile this on their worldview too. What if God told Hitler to do all those things?
Yeah.
Would it be wrong?
Yeah. Okay, so you want me to answer that last question first?
Sure.
If God did that, then no, it wouldn't. But I think that God would not do that because God is constrained by his perfect nature. So it's kind of
But it would be perfect if he said to do that.
Yes, but if that wasn't in fact the perfect thing for Hitler to do, then God would not command him to do that. Right? So a perfect chess player, right? A perfect chess player would be constrained by his nature as a perfect chess player to only make the right move every time. Isn't that true?
Maybe.
If we actually had a perfect chess player, right? Like a perfect chess player existed, and his nature was to be a perfect player. He was never making
it. Well, yeah, but I mean, like we know what the normative ends of chess are is to win the game. So what are the normative ends of God's commandments? Because I think they're completely arbitrary.
Well, they might seem arbitrary to you, but did you know that when you watch the greatest chess engines play chess, a lot of their moves look completely ridiculous? Did you know that?
That's probably the case, yeah.
It is. I watch chess. I love playing chess.
And I believe you.
Yeah, a lot of the moves that they make look absolutely crazy. I mean, sometimes they move their king in the middle of the game and they don't castle it. They just move it into towards the center of the board.
You're so far over my head, but
I'm sorry, you don't know anything about chess?
No.
They do crazy stuff, okay? And they do things where professional chess players will be watching the move and they're like, I have no idea what it was thinking when it did that. But the chess player never says that machine made a bad move. They never say that. So,
but when this goes to God, you're just gonna have to say, "Well, I just have faith that God does the right thing."
Yeah,
because I've defined God to be what is morally the objective moral source or whatever. I mean, that's not an argument. That's not. It doesn't refute anything that a naturalist could claim about morality, and it's also. Well, I was going to say it's subjective, but we said we defined it to be. But the choice to define it is a subjective choice.
Sure. So I'm not saying that we just define God and we just give him a bunch of random properties. I think that there are actually good reasons to believe that God has the properties that we have ascribed to him. I mean, if you go and you study some of the literature on this, God is completely distinct. Okay, do you know anything about the contingency argument? We're kind of going down a rabbit hole here. Maybe we shouldn't do this, but
I don't think we have time for that. Is the problem?
But what I want to say briefly then is that we're not just defining God. We're looking at the state of things, and we're kind of working our way back, and we're saying, okay, what's the best explanation for this, for all this stuff? And I think that there's actually a really good justification for why we should think that God is all powerful, all knowing, and we're not just like arbitrarily defining God the way that we are. I think there's actually good justifications. And if that is the case, that there are good justifications for thinking that God is a perfect being, then we should expect God to only command the correct things, of course. So it's just a matter of whether or not those justifications hold or not. And I think that they do.
Um. Okay. I think probably there aren't very many questions, but
Can
I
I
think we
ask
should.
something?
What's that?
Can I ask something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead. You can ask me several questions if you
Yeah,
want.
we're gonna go far afield for a second here, but what do you think about the current state of conversation between theist and atheist? Do you think that it can be improved? Let me kind of give you some context and how I see it, and then I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that the best atheist right now, in my view, is Alex
I
O'Connor.
I knew you were gonna say that.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? Do you think you're the best?
Yeah, obviously, but he's definitely the second best
Okay, so
by a long ways.
yeah, okay, so we both
No,
like
I
Alex.
think he's the best. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the reason why he's good, I think that he's a good spokesman for atheism because
Yeah.
he focuses on the arguments. He doesn't attack people. Very, very rarely. He seems very open-minded. He's easy to talk to. He's not hostile, And I think that atheism and atheists need more people like that, in my view. What do you think?
Um no, I pretty much agree.
Okay.
I think that Alex is an excellent recruiter. I
Yeah.
think that a person like Matt Dillahunty used to be very good at that, but he just kind of seems miserable nowadays.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like he's become the fire and brimstone atheist.
Yeah.
He seems to kind of almost have the personality of like I see like TikTok videos or whatever of Christian content creators just saying gross, hateful things or just being douchebags or whatever. And people say you're the reason people are walking away from the faith or whatever. Now,
Hmm.
I don't think Dillahunty pushes anybody toward theism or anything
Right.
like that. But I don't
Yeah.
think he's a good recruiter.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that Alex O'Connor is, and
Yeah.
I'm saying this because I want to talk to more atheists that are like Alex O'Connor. It's okay with me to me, in my view, we can have different beliefs about whether or not God exists, and we can still be friends. I mean, maybe you and I will never be friends or whatever, but I have a lot of friends that are atheists that disagree with me very much on certain things, but we are still good friends. We check in on each other, we support each other, I help them. They have given me feedback on arguments, all kinds of stuff. And it seems like there's this belief or something where it's like if we disagree about whether or not God exists, then we have to be enemies. And I don't think that that needs to be the case. I think that we can have really good, productive conversations about this stuff, even though we disagree. And it doesn't have to be contentious, and it can be really productive. And we can just let everybody kind of sort through it. And I think that we need to. I think that this is really important stuff. Like we need to get to the bottom of this stuff. We need to be talking about it in productive ways. And I just don't think that it's being talked about very productively. What do you think?
No, I basically agree.
Yeah. Okay. Well, very cool, man. Yeah. So hopefully, the people that are watching, the atheists that are watching, agree with that as well. I just want to make the conversation better because there's just a lot of, and it's not just atheists, it's Christians too, and sometimes it's me, frankly, but people just being hostile to one another. And I'm like, we do need to sit down and just discuss this and make it just about the ideas, not about the person, and let's try to get to the bottom of this stuff. It's really important.
Yeah. All right. You want me to dig through
Yeah,
the
let's
super
do
chats? I don't
chats.
think there might only be like 2 or 3 genuine questions in there. Pearson's,
Okay,
yeah, we looked at that one. Pearson's first debate. So proud. Thank you, future. He's probably not watching anymore, but
probably not.
been listening to you for most of my 12-hour shift. Thanks for making my job a lot better by making it go by faster. It's the small things. Good luck, bro. You are very welcome, Brevin Redinger, aka
Oh,
Shrek. Don't worry, Peterson. Us little peepees got your back. I think, therefore, I am. Yeah, that's not a question. That's also not a question, but I appreciate it. Super sweaty nerd man. There seems to be a dispute over if laws. I remember when this got asked. There seems to be a dispute over if laws of physics are governing or if they are simply observations. If it's the former, we need the evidence. Yeah, so I think the laws of physics are descriptive, not prescriptive. I feel the same way about logic, you know. But you can talk about this however you feel.
well, when you say the laws of nature are descriptive rather than prescriptive, I mean, what do you mean by prescriptive in that sense? Because normally when you say something is prescriptive, you mean that like there's an obligation. So what do you mean by prescriptive when it comes to laws of nature?
I don't like. I'm not a Platonist. I don't think that there's this abstract realm of where these kinds of things are, or like math or whatever, because math is the language used to describe them, for example, right? So
Yeah.
I don't believe that math is discovered. I think it's invented, and I don't think that concepts or whatever are like Platonistic in any sense. I don't think we pluck out of some realm some sort of truth value and then apply it to the universe. We do it
Right.
in exactly the other way. So that's what I mean by descriptive, not prescriptive.
Okay. Yeah. Normally, prescription, like when you talk about prescription, it just means that human beings have an obligation, as far as I'm aware. But yeah, if you mean that, I mean, if there was a platonic realm, that would still be descriptive, wouldn't it? Like you would just describe the platonic realm, like here's a square in this realm. That would still be descriptive, wouldn't it?
I mean, you'd have a description of it, but I don't think that the reason squares exist is because there's an abstract realm where they exist, and that's their grounding.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
You think it's
Prescriptive in this case, I mean, makes the thing occur or exist or whatever.
okay? So it makes the thing what it is. Okay. So you just kind of think the thing is what it is, and there's nothing beyond it that
Yeah,
makes it what.
like brute fact. Like this pencil is yellow.
Mhm.
Like I use the laws of logic to describe it, but it's not like the law of identity is what makes this thing what it is and not this. Like that's literally a descriptive.
Yeah.
It's just the way I apply language to the things. That's why I
Right.
say, and this is a conversation we won't have time for, but like I don't think that the laws of logic actually exist. You know.
Yeah, you're just like observing patterns, and you're talking about the observation of patterns. Is that what you think it is?
That's yeah. I suppose.
Okay. Yeah, we don't need to go into that. Are there more super chats?
Yeah, I don't know how many of them are real questions. May Spanky save us all from the illogically minded. Hail Spanky. This is Spanky if you didn't know. Right there.
Okay.
You know that there is no God. You just yes, this person was just trolling me, I think. This guy's just a presuppositionalist. Do you describe yourself as a presuppositionalist?
So technically, I guess I am, but I really think
I
that
mean,
that's a
if you're
misnomer.
running tag, that's kind of what you are.
So I think that it's a misnomer though to say that it's about presuppositions, because it's not that we're just saying like, oh, I'm just going to presuppose this and I'm going to presuppose that. We're really like starting with certain beliefs, and we're asking ourselves what needs to be the case in order for this belief to make sense, and then we ask what needs to be the case for this belief to make sense. And so it's not that we're just like arbitrarily saying, well, God exists, and then we're just going to like build from there, and my presupposition is true because it's true. And this is the way that a lot of atheists kind of like hear presuppositionalism, and I don't think that it's articulated very well in general. But when you talk about how something has a precondition, right, like something else needs to be the case for something else to be the case, I don't think that that's actually a presupposition. I think that's actually an ontological sort of argument. Um, Now, let me give you a quick example, just to try to make my point. So, in order for based on what we understand about electricity, it has to be the case that if you live in a world with electricity, your world also has to be a world with space. Okay, because if the world you live in doesn't have space, then electricity, which is the movement of electrons, can't obtain. So you could say that space is a necessary precondition for the possibility of electricity. I observe electricity, and therefore I must be in a world with space. I think that's totally fine. And that's not just me like assuming, because I can make the argument for why we need space in order to get electricity. I can justify that. So I think that the term presuppositional is a misnomer, and I don't think that Christians should be calling it that, frankly.
Okay. Quickly, because there are starting to get some more pop up. We gotta go through them quickly. But like, what's your opinion on a guy like Saitan Kate? Do you think he like, oh man, what he does is awesome, or do you think he's just a bloviator?
Um, I think he could do it in a more productive way. I'll tell you this. When I was an atheist, and I was an atheist until I was 28, I used to hate Saitan. Um, he used to drive me nuts. Him and Eric Hovind, and
Oh jeez. Yeah.
I'm actually friends with Eric Hovind now, believe it or not, and I actually do think he's a good guy. But and I'm sure we'll disagree on that, and I might be wrong, but I don't think I am. We've known each other for a while. But to your question, yeah, he used to drive me absolutely insane. I hated presuppositional apologetics. I absolutely despised it. I thought it was completely disingenuous, dishonest, all that stuff. So I know how you guys feel about it. I totally get it. Um, and I think that I think that it's done in an unproductive way too much. I'll put it that way, because tag can be very effective to shut atheists up, but I think I think that it should only be used in that way when you're dealing with an atheist that is really being belligerent.
Okay.
And I've seen it be used belligerently against atheists that are not being belligerent, against atheists that are trying to have a conversation. And I don't think it should be used that way when you're dealing with that kind of atheist. So I think that it's used as like a bazooka against
That's a good
against
way of putting it.
yeah. A lot of the time I don't like the way that it's used.
Okay.
I'll put it.
So, I'm going to say this with all the respect in the world. There's nothing wrong with anything you're saying, but you're saying too much. I got to get out of here before too long, because
All
we
right,
got
bro.
stuff to we still got to try to get through some of this stuff. So
Okay.
this person wrote that a tag can be used with any god, including a pantheist one. I think
Hmm.
this is valid. I wouldn't necessarily use this as an attack against anything you brought up,
Yeah.
because you said you wanted to just talk about general theism, but
Yeah.
I do find like presups and people that run tag who, like, I ask them, do you think it's possible a god other than the Christian God exists? And they say no. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
well, that's just completely stupid. So,
Well, okay. You want me to be quick, so all I will say is there are other necessary preconditions that need to be in place in order to get knowledge, that go past just God existing. Like you do need other things. For example, if you look at the problem of the one and the many, the God of Christianity actually really explains that and makes sense of it very well. But in order for me to explain what that is, I'm gonna have to take a while. So we could do another, if you want to do another show with me, I can go into that and why I think that it's not just any God that can get you all the things that you need. So any God can get you some of the things you need to make sense of the world, but I think only the God of Christianity can get you all of the things that you need to have intelligibility. Does
okay.
that make
I mean, I hear what you're saying, but
Yeah.
um, man, Afro sent all kinds of stuff. So they said a universe is finely tuned for black holes more so than us. So I don't know. I don't know how much you listen to people give the counter arguments for like fine tuning, for example. But
Yeah.
one of the huge problems I have with the fine tuning argument is they say the constants are finely tuned for intelligent life.
Mhm.
No, because life doesn't operate according to a different set of physics. Everything in the universe has the properties that it has because of the laws of physics. So there's absolutely no reason you can't say, I believe in a God that desired the universe to exist so that it could create black holes. And this universe would perfectly fit the description of that God.
Yeah, that's an interesting argument. I'd have to think about it. I I know you're trying to get through it, so I'll just let you have the word on that one.
Okay, that's basically it. A wise man once said, God is undeniable, for Peterson's pudding doth clap, yea, and clappeth Peterson doth. I think that's in reference to when people were trying to get me to make it clap the other day. Um, Ask him about David's 10 concubines. Was it moral? I mean, does God tell David to marry 10 concubines?
No, not
Yeah,
that I'm aware of.
I don't know either. So,
God did a lot of stuff that God didn't agree with.
yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff in the Bible that happens that's wrong, but doesn't have God's endorsement. I think there's all kinds of things in the Bible that are hideous that had God's endorsement, but
Yeah.
sometimes my side they're not good at bringing up examples. Afrofire, who asked a bunch of questions, thank you. If you want to have a good faith conversation, maybe don't tell people they have no basis for their beliefs because they don't presuppose your idea of God. Boom, absolutely wrecked. Darwin to Jesus. I don't know how you're ever going to show your face on the internet ever again. Well, you
Yeah,
don't show your face on the internet, so point proven, actually, right?
that avatar is exactly what I look like. So,
White Chad Jesus. Okay.
so just for the record, that's not Jesus. That's meant to be Daniel from the lion's den. But a
Oh,
lot of people,
interesting.
yeah, if you actually look at the original picture, there's a lion behind the guy in that. So yeah, it's not meant to be Jesus, but a lot of people think it is.
I
I
mean, it
think it.
looks just like a Europeanized Jesus, though, is the
I
problem.
I guess so. I didn't think that at all. The thought didn't even cross my mind. But then when people started saying, "Why is your avatar Jesus?" I was like, "Okay, yeah, it kind of does look that way, but it's not intended to, believe it or not."
All right, Mr. Kiki1 said, if you're going to apply Occam's razor, which this didn't come up, but in
Yeah.
saying that a belief in a creator is the most rational belief, then do you believe your presuppositions are more simple than an atheist's? So parsimonious is something that gets thrown in here a lot. And I have a huge problem with this. Theists pretend invoking God because it's like singular is more parsimonious.
Yeah.
The response to that is no, it absolutely isn't, because however complex the universe is, God necessarily must be more complex. So you haven't like given something that's more parsimonious or more likely to be true by virtue of it has fewer assumptions. What's your response?
So, Eric, I really think that this is a bad argument by you. Because complexity is traditionally, unless you mean it differently, complexity is when a bunch of different parts make something else, right? So a watch is considered complex because it has a bunch of parts working together to make it up. And the argument is never that if something is complex, then something more complex must have made it, because that would create an infinite regress of complexity and more complexity, which would be really stupid to argue for. The argument is that if something is complex, then an intelligence is responsible. And an intelligence could be very simple, right? An intelligence doesn't need to be like have 5,000 moving parts to it, or 50,000 or a million moving parts to make it up. In fact, there's this doctrine that many theists hold to called divine simplicity, which says that God is not complex at all. He's not made of any parts, but he is intelligent. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not my argument, but that is
Okay.
the typical rebuttal to the argument that's made.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can believe that something can create something more complex than itself. I mean, a pile of garbage is more complex than the stuff that the garbage was before it turned into
Right.
garbage, right? A decomposing body is more complex than a non-decomposing body. I think there's actually we'd have to turn this around in a big
Well,
way,
I mean,
but
yep.
there are arguments against design that work like that pretty well.
Yeah. Well,
I
I mean,
think.
even evolution believes that you can get complexity from non-complexity. So, I mean, right there. I mean, nobody. Just for the
Well, you
record,
could say complexity accumulates. I'm not sure if you would say that you get it from non-complexity though.
well,
Like
human beings are definitely more complex than like the first life or when there was no life, right?
yeah, complexity accumulates,
Yeah.
not
More.
complexity from non-complexity though.
Okay, yeah. So you have a little bit and then you get more. So you can get more from less, which you already said. I'm just
Sort
saying.
of, yeah.
Yeah.
We
So
should
just
just
for the
debate evolution next time. Actually, that would be funny
record.
or
Yeah. Let's
fun. I
go.
don't know why I said funny. Um, do you think that your presuppositions require fewer assumptions than an atheist?
Um.
That one I don't think you can get away with because
Well,
you have to invoke something outside of the shared reality that we all agree exists.
yeah. I. It's kind of difficult to answer that because I think that the atheist has to kind of ad hoc a lot of things, like and basically appeal to brute fact. If you push them far enough, they're going to appeal to something that has no explanation. So in some ways, I think that Christianity is and theism is simpler, but in other ways, I think that it's not simpler. But I think that if I just granted that I have to assume at least one extra thing besides you guys, because you guys are like, okay, I'm assuming uniformity of nature, I'm assuming my reasoning is sound, I'm assuming all these things I need, and I say I'm assuming all those things too, plus God, so that's one extra thing, right?
Yeah.
I think that that thing is a necessary thing to assume in order to get the other things. So I'm just like, you're not assuming enough, right? So yes, the number that you have for
Okay.
assumptions is it is less than mine, but it's not enough, right? It would be like, imagine if I said, I'm just going to assume one thing. I'm going to assume that my senses work. Okay, so I'm not going to assume my reasoning is valid. I'm not going to assume uniformity of nature, all these other things. You'd be like, no, dude, you need to assume more things than that in order to make sense of the world. And that's what I'm saying. I'm like, you guys aren't assuming enough things. You need to assume God exists too. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I think an atheist and a theist could agree on. I said proximate versus ultimate, but I think they could agree on sufficient. And then the atheist can be agnostic about whether or not God is necessary, necessary and sufficient or whatever.
Exactly.
I mean, that doesn't make the atheist like dishonest or anything. I don't think. All right, this is the last one. The
Okay.
universe is finely tuned for low-paying jobs at Taco Bell. Do you agree or disagree?
I don't agree.
Well,
But
I mean, if the physical constants were any different, then there wouldn't be any Taco Bells.
it's kind of a funny question. I guess you could say sure, but what was it about minimum wage? I think that the
Low
wage.
paying jobs at Taco Bell, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could maybe become a millionaire and buy Taco Bell and pay them more. I don't know. Uh,
Could
it's
be.
a funny question.
Something like that. No, yeah, my audience is as funny as I am good looking. They're
Well, they're
really
hilarious.
funny. They're so funny.
I don't know why everybody's giving me such a hard time about the beard, man. I don't think that it's that bad.
Oh, because I shaved?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just I don't like it either. It was an accident. I didn't mean to cut the whole thing off. It's on its way back though.
Yeah, it'll grow back soon.